My name is Sarah Mitchell, and I'm 34 years old. Until 3 months ago, I thought the worst thing my mother could ever say to me was that I was a disappointment. I was wrong. The worst thing she could say was, "You're dead to me, get out," while pointing at the front door of the house I grew up in, her face twisted with a rage I'd never seen before. What she didn't know in that moment, what nobody in my family knew, was that I owned the mortgage on that very house. And what happened next changed everything between us forever. Let me take you back to the beginning, because this story doesn't start with that horrible confrontation in my childhood living room in suburban Chicago. It starts with a little girl who just wanted her mother's approval, who grew up believing she was never quite good enough, never quite smart enough, never quite successful enough to earn the love that seemed to flow so freely to her older brother Michael. Have you ever felt like no matter what you accomplished, it was never enough for the people who were supposed to love you unconditionally? Have you ever wondered what it would take to finally prove your worth to someone who seemed determined to never see it? If you have, then you'll understand the journey I'm about to share with you. And if this story resonates with you, please give it a like and subscribe for more real-life stories about family, forgiveness, and finding your own strength when the people closest to you let you down. Growing up in Oak Park, Illinois, I was always the other daughter. Michael was the golden child, the one who played football, got decent grades without trying, and somehow managed to charm our mother, Patricia, with his mere existence. I was the one who brought home straight A's and was told I was showing off. I was the one who worked 3 jobs to put myself through Northwestern University, while Michael got a free ride through a state school he barely graduated from. I was the one who started my own financial consulting firm at 28 while he bounced from job to job, always landing back on our mother's couch when things got tough. By the time I turned 30, I had built a successful practice specializing in real estate investments and portfolio management. My client base included everyone from young professionals buying their first homes to wealthy retirees looking to diversify their holdings. I had a beautiful apartment in downtown Chicago, a reliable BMW, and a 6-figure income that I'd earned through sheer determination and countless 18-hour days. But none of that seemed to matter to my mother. When I'd visit for holidays or family dinners, she'd still find ways to diminish my achievements while praising Michael for basic adult responsibilities like showing up to work on time. The irony wasn't lost on me that my expertise was in helping people make smart financial decisions, yet I couldn't seem to find a way to invest in a relationship with my own mother that would yield any return. I tried everything: expensive gifts, surprise visits, offering to help with her finances when Dad passed away 5 years ago. Nothing worked. She remained cold, critical, and seemingly determined to keep me at arm's length while rolling out the red carpet every time Michael graced her with his presence. 3 years ago, when Mom started struggling with the mortgage payments on the family home after Dad's death, I saw an opportunity. Not to help her directly. She made it clear she didn't want my help, but to help her indirectly through a series of carefully orchestrated financial maneuvers involving a trust I'd established and a property management company I'd quietly acquired. I purchased her mortgage from the bank. She never knew it was me. As far as she was concerned, she was just dealing with a new, more lenient mortgage company that seemed surprisingly understanding about late payments and financial hardships. For 2 years, I watched from the shadows as my mother's financial situation stabilized. The new mortgage terms I'd arranged were incredibly favorable: lower interest rates, extended payment periods, and a grace period that meant she'd never face foreclosure, even if she missed several payments. I told myself I was doing it out of love, out of a desire to protect the house where I'd grown up, where Dad had taught me to ride a bike in the driveway, and where Mom had once upon a time tucked me into bed with stories about princesses who saved themselves. But if I'm being completely honest, there was something else driving my decision. There was a part of me that found a dark satisfaction in being the one who held the power, even if she didn't know it. After decades of feeling powerless in our relationship, of being the one who always had to prove herself. There was something almost intoxicating about being the one in control for once. I wasn't proud of that feeling, but it was there, lurking beneath my more noble intentions. My life in Chicago was everything I'd worked for. My consulting firm, Mitchell Financial Strategies, occupied a sleek office on the 32nd floor of a downtown high-rise with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered stunning views of Lake Michigan. I had a team of 6 employees, all smart, dedicated professionals who respected my expertise and contributed to our growing reputation in the financial planning industry. Every few months, I'd make the drive from Chicago to Oak Park to visit Mom. These visits had become increasingly strained over the years, but I kept going because some part of me still hoped that one day she'd look at me with the same pride she showed when talking about Michael's latest girlfriend or his new apartment or his promotion to assistant manager at the sporting goods store where he worked. I'd sit in her living room, surrounded by family photos that seemed to feature Michael prominently while I appeared in smaller, less central positions, and I'd try to make conversation about her garden, her book club, her volunteer work at the local library. She'd respond with polite but distant answers, asking perfunctory questions about my business that felt more like social obligations than genuine interest. When I try to share my excitement about a particularly challenging client case I'd solved or a new investment strategy I developed, her eyes would glaze over, and she'd change the subject to something Michael had done or said. It was like talking to a wall, but I kept trying because the alternative, accepting that my mother simply didn't love me the way I needed her to, was too painful to consider. The closest we'd come to a real conversation in recent years had been after Dad's funeral, when she'd broken down crying in the kitchen while I was helping clean up after the reception. For a brief moment, she'd leaned against me, letting me comfort her, and I'd thought maybe his death would bring us closer together. But that moment had passed quickly, and within a week, she was back to her old self, polite but distant, interested in Michael's life but indifferent to mine. The thing about secrets is that they have a way of shaping you, even when you think you're the one controlling them. For 2 years, I carried the knowledge that I owned my mother's mortgage like a talisman, something that made me feel powerful and protective at the same time. Every month, when the payment came through my property management company, I'd feel a complex mix of emotions. Pride that I could take care of her without her knowing. Frustration that this was the only way I could show my love that she'd actually accept, even unknowingly. And underneath it all, a growing sense of anticipation for the day, when the truth would inevitably come out. That day came sooner than I expected, and in a way I never could have imagined. It was a Saturday in March when I got the call from Michael. I was in my office catching up on client portfolios and enjoying the rare quiet of a weekend morning when my phone buzzed with his name on the screen. We rarely talked unless it was about Mom or during family gatherings, so I answered with a sense of immediate concern. "Sarah, you need to get over here right now," he said without preamble, his voice tight with an emotion I couldn't quite identify. "Mom's lost her mind, and she's saying things about you that don't make any sense." My heart started pounding. "What kind of things? Is she okay? Should I call a doctor? Just get here. Now." "And Sarah—" He paused, and I could hear him taking a deep breath. "Bring whatever financial documents you have about Mom's house. She's making some crazy accusations, and I need you to prove they're not true." The 40-minute drive from downtown Chicago to Oak Park felt like the longest journey of my life. My mind raced through possibilities, none of them good. Had she found out about the mortgage? Somehow, had something gone wrong with the payments? Had my carefully constructed secret finally collapsed around me? When I pulled into the driveway of my childhood home, I could see Michael pacing in the front yard, his phone pressed to his ear. He looked up as I parked, and the expression on his face made my stomach drop. He looked angry, confused, and something else, disappointed, betrayed. I couldn't tell, but it wasn't good. She's inside, he said as I approached. Sarah, I need you to tell me the truth. Have you been lying to us about something? Because Mom is in there claiming that you own her house, and that's impossible, right? That's completely insane, right? I felt the blood drain from my face. This was it, the moment I'd been both dreading and anticipating for 2 years. The moment when my secret would either destroy what was left of my relationship with my family or finally show them who I really was and what I was capable of. Michael, I started, but he cut me off. Oh my God. Oh my God, it's true, isn't it? Sarah, what the hell have you been doing? Before I could answer, the front door flew open, and my mother appeared on the porch. I'd never seen her look like this before. Her usually perfectly styled gray hair was disheveled, her face was flushed with anger, and her hands were shaking as she pointed at me. You, she screamed, her voice cracking with fury. How dare you show your face here after what you've done? How dare you? Mom, please let me explain. Explain? Explain how you've been spying on me. Explain how you've been controlling my life without my knowledge. Explain how you bought my house out from under me like I'm some kind of charity case. The words hit me like physical blows. This wasn't how I'd imagined this conversation going. In the scenarios I'd played out in my head, there had been surprise, maybe some initial anger, but then gratitude, understanding, recognition that everything I'd done had been out of love. That's not what happened, I said, trying to keep my voice calm and steady. Mom, I was trying to help you. After Dad died, you were struggling with the payments, and I was worried you'd lose the house. I found a way to make sure that would never happen. By lying to me, by deceiving me, by making me feel like a fool who doesn't even know who owns her own home. Michael stepped between us, his face a mask of confusion and anger. Sarah, is it true? Do you actually own Mom's mortgage? I looked at both of them, my mother's face twisted with rage and betrayal, my brother's expression caught between disbelief and accusation, and I realized that the truth I'd thought would set me free was about to destroy everything. Yes, I said quietly. I own it. I bought it from the bank 3 years ago. The silence that followed felt like it lasted forever. I could hear a lawnmower running somewhere in the neighborhood, the sound of children playing in a nearby yard, normal Saturday, sounds that contrasted sharply with the crisis unfolding on my mother's front porch. How could you? She whispered, and the pain in her voice was worse than her screaming had been. How could you do this to me? How could you take away the one thing I had left of your father, the one place that was still mine? I didn't take it away. I protested. I protected it. Mom, you were 3 months behind on payments. The bank was starting foreclosure proceedings. I found out through a client who works there, and I acted fast to save your house. Without telling me, without asking me, without giving me the chance to handle my own problems. You wouldn't have let me help you if I'd asked directly. You never let me help you with anything, because I don't need your help. I don't need you to swoop in and fix my life like I'm some pathetic old woman who can't take care of herself. The conversation spiraled from there, voices getting louder, accusations flying, years of resentment and misunderstanding bubbling to the surface. Michael tried to mediate, but he was as shocked as Mom was, and his attempts at peacekeeping only seemed to make things worse. Sarah, how did you even do this? He asked. How do you secretly buy someone's mortgage? I explained the trust, the property management company, the legal maneuvers that had allowed me to purchase the debt without her knowledge. With each detail, my mother's face grew more horrified, more betrayed. You've been watching me, she said, her voice trembling. You've been monitoring my finances, knowing when I was late with payments, knowing when I was struggling, and you said nothing. You let me worry. You let me lose sleep. You let me feel like a failure when all along you were pulling the strings. I was protecting you. You were controlling me. You were playing God with my life. Finally, my mother seemed to reach her breaking point. She straightened her shoulders, looked me directly in the eye, and spoke with a coldness I'd never heard from her before. I want you to transfer that mortgage back to a real bank immediately. I don't want anything from you. No favorable terms, no special treatment, nothing. I want a normal mortgage with normal payments and normal consequences. If I can't make them, Mom, that's not practical. The terms I arranged are saving you hundreds of dollars a month. I don't care if it costs me more money. I'd rather lose this house than owe it to you. The words stung more than anything else she'd said. She would literally rather lose her home than accept help from me. You're dead to me, she said, her voice cold and final. Get out of my house and don't ever come back. I don't want to see you, I don't want to hear from you, and I don't want your money or your help or your pity. You're dead to me. The words hit me like a physical blow, knocking the breath from my lungs and leaving me speechless. In all our years of conflict, through all the disappointments and misunderstandings, she had never said anything so cruel, so final. I stood there on the porch where I'd learned to ride a bike, where I'd waited for prom dates, where I'd said goodbye before leaving for college, and I felt something inside me break. Mom, please. Get out, she screamed, pointing toward my car. Get out of my sight. I mean it, Sarah. You are dead to me. Dead. I looked at Michael, hoping for some support, some mediation, but he just stared at me with a mixture of shock and disappointment that made it clear he wasn't going to defend me. Not this time. Maybe not ever. I walked to my car in a daze, my legs feeling unsteady beneath me. As I reached for the door handle, I turned back one more time, hoping to see some softness in my mother's face, some indication that she didn't really mean what she'd said. But she had already gone inside, slamming the door so hard that the sound echoed through the quiet suburban street. The drive back to Chicago was a blur of tears and rage and confusion. I kept replaying the conversation, trying to understand how my attempt to help had been so thoroughly misunderstood, so completely rejected. I'd saved her house. I'd protected her from foreclosure. I'd made sure she could stay in the home she'd shared with my father for 35 years. And instead of gratitude, I'd received the most devastating rejection of my life. By the time I reached my loft, I was emotionally exhausted but too wound up to rest. I poured myself a glass of wine and stood at my floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the city lights and trying to make sense of what had just happened. My phone had been buzzing with calls from Michael, but I wasn't ready to talk to him yet. I needed time to process, to understand what this meant for my family, for my relationship with my mother, for the secret I'd carried for 3 years. I finally answered Michael's 5th call around 9 o'clock that evening. Sarah, thank God, he said immediately. Look, I don't understand what happened today, but Mom is really upset. She's been crying since you left, and she won't talk to me about it. She just keeps saying that you betrayed her, that you've been lying to her for years. I wasn't lying, I said, my voice hoarse from crying. I was protecting her. By buying her house without telling her? Sarah, how did you even do that? How do you secretly buy someone's mortgage? I explained the process again. The trust, the property management company, the legal maneuvers that had allowed me to purchase the mortgage without my mother's knowledge. As I talked, I could hear the silence on the other end of the line growing heavier. Jesus, Sarah, he said finally, do you realize how this looks? Do you understand why she's so upset? I understand that I saved her house when she couldn't make the payments. I understand that I prevented her from losing the only thing she had left of Dad. I understand that I've been quietly taking care of her for 3 years while she treated me like I didn't matter. But you did it behind her back. You made decisions about her life without including her. You took away her agency, her dignity, her right to handle her own problems. Her problems that she couldn't handle. Michael, she was going to lose the house. The bank was going to foreclose. I had to act fast. And she never would have accepted my help if I'd offered it directly. Maybe not, but that was her choice to make. Sarah, I know you meant well, but this is really messed up. You can't just take over someone's life because you think you know what's best for them. The conversation went on for another hour, circular and frustrating, with neither of us able to understand the other's perspective. Michael couldn't see why I'd felt compelled to act in secret, and I couldn't understand why my good intentions were being interpreted as manipulation and control. She's talking about changing her will, he said. Finally, she wants to make sure you can't inherit the house or make any decisions about her care if something happens to her. Sarah, she's really serious about cutting you out of her life completely. Over the following weeks, I tried to reach out to my mother multiple times. I sent flowers, which were returned unopened. I wrote letters, which came back marked "Return to Sender." I even tried showing up at her house, but she wouldn't come to the door, though I could see her watching me from behind the living room curtains. Michael became the reluctant intermediary, reporting that she was doing fine, but remained adamant that she didn't want to see me or talk to me. According to him, she had contacted a lawyer about transferring the mortgage and was exploring her options for getting me completely out of her financial picture. She's also talking about selling the house. He told me during one of our weekly check-in calls. She says she can't stand living there knowing that you own it, that it doesn't feel like hers anymore. The irony was devastating. My attempt to keep her in the house was now driving her to want to leave it. The isolation was affecting every aspect of my life. For the first time in my adult life, I felt truly alone. I threw myself into work, taking on new clients and expanding my business, but even my professional success felt hollow without family to share it with. I'd built a life that looked perfect from the outside: successful career, beautiful home, financial security, but the foundation had always been my hope that someday my mother would be proud of me. Now that hope was gone, destroyed by the very secret I'd thought would finally prove my worth to her. Friends and colleagues noticed my distress, but I couldn't bring myself to explain what had happened. How could I tell people that my mother had disowned me for secretly paying her mortgage? How could I explain that my attempt to help had been seen as the ultimate betrayal? My assistant Jennifer started looking at me with concern when I'd zone out during client meetings or forget important appointments. My work, which had always been my refuge and my pride, was suffering because I couldn't concentrate on anything except the growing chasm between me and my mother. I began having trouble sleeping, lying awake at night, replaying our final confrontation, and wondering if there was anything I could have said or done differently. I'd scroll through old photos on my phone, looking at pictures of family holidays and birthdays, trying to pinpoint when everything had gone so wrong between us. She asks about you sometimes, Michael admitted during one call. Not directly, but she'll say things like, "I wonder if Sarah is eating enough," or "I hope Sarah remembered to get her car serviced." Then she catches herself and gets angry again. Those small glimpses of my mother's continuing concern for me were both comforting and heartbreaking. They suggested that somewhere underneath her anger and hurt, she still cared about me. But they also made her rejection feel even more painful because they proved that cutting me out of her life was hurting her too. As spring turned to summer, my emotional state began to affect my work in ways I couldn't ignore. I found myself distracted during client meetings, making small mistakes in calculations, struggling to maintain the sharp focus that had built my reputation. I realized I needed to either get my personal life under control or risk destroying the professional life I'd worked so hard to build. I decided to seek help from a therapist, something I'd never considered before. Dr. Rebecca Chun had been recommended by a colleague, and her office in Lincoln Park felt like a safe space where I could finally unpack the complicated emotions I'd been carrying for months. During our first session, I told her the whole story: my childhood, my relationship with my mother, the secret mortgage purchase, the devastating confrontation, and the ongoing estrangement. "Tell me about your motivation for buying the mortgage," she said after I'd finished my account. "What were you hoping to accomplish?" I wanted to protect her, I said immediately. I couldn't bear the thought of her losing the house. "And what else?" The question caught me off guard. "What do you mean?" "You said you wanted to protect her, and I believe that's true. But what else were you hoping for? What did you imagine would happen when she eventually found out?" I sat in silence for a long moment, considering the question. What had I been hoping for? In my fantasies, how had I imagined the revelation playing out? "I guess I thought she'd be grateful," I admitted finally. "I thought she'd realize that I'd been taking care of her all along, that I was capable of solving her problems, that I was someone she could count on." "So, you were hoping to prove your worth to her?" "Yes. No. I don't know." I felt tears starting to form. Maybe both. Maybe I wanted to be the hero, for once instead of the disappointment. Dr. Chen nodded thoughtfully. "It sounds like you were trying to earn love through financial support, which is understandable given your history with your mother. But can you see how she might have experienced this differently? How she might have felt controlled rather than cared for?" That session was the beginning of a painful but necessary process of examining my motivations and understanding how my actions, however well-intentioned, had violated my mother's autonomy and dignity. I began to see that my secret purchase of her mortgage had been as much about my own emotional needs as it had been about helping her. I'd wanted to be needed, to be the savior, to finally be the daughter who mattered. Your mother's reaction suggests that autonomy and dignity are very important to her, Dr. Chin explained during our third session. When you took over her mortgage without her knowledge, you inadvertently communicated that you didn't trust her to handle her own affairs. From her perspective, you treated her like a child who couldn't make her own decisions. "But she was going to lose the house," I protested. "She couldn't handle it." "Maybe not in the way you would have handled it, but that doesn't mean she was completely helpless. She might have found other solutions: downsizing, getting a roommate, applying for assistance programs, asking family for help directly. By stepping in secretly, you denied her the opportunity to explore those options." It was a hard truth to swallow, but I was beginning to understand that my mother's anger wasn't just about the deception. It was about feeling infantilized and disrespected. Meanwhile, the practical aspects of owning my mother's mortgage were becoming increasingly complicated. She had stopped making payments entirely after our confrontation, which was her right under the generous terms I'd established. But more troubling was the information I was receiving about my mother's financial situation through Michael. She hired a contractor to redo the entire kitchen. Michael told me during one of our calls, "Sarah, it's costing her $15,000 she doesn't have." The news about the kitchen renovation filled me with a mixture of guilt and frustration. My mother was spending money she didn't have on unnecessary improvements, apparently to spite me or to reclaim some sense of ownership over her home. The irony was devastating. My attempt to secure her housing situation had led to greater financial instability than she'd experienced before I intervened. She's also been talking about selling the house and moving to a smaller place, Michael continued. She says she can't stand living there knowing that you own the mortgage, that it doesn't feel like hers anymore. Sarah, she's talking about moving to one of those senior living communities in Florida. The thought of my mother uprooting herself from the community where she'd lived for decades, leaving behind her friends and her routine and her memories, all because of my actions, was almost unbearable. Everything I'd done to keep her in that house was now driving her away from it. During my therapy sessions, Dr. Chen helped me understand that my mother's extreme reaction might be rooted in her own insecurities and fears about aging and dependence. For someone who values independence, discovering that her daughter has been secretly managing her finances could feel like a preview of losing control over her life. She explained, it might have triggered deeper fears about becoming dependent or incompetent. But I never thought of her as incompetent. I protested. I just wanted to help. Your intentions don't change how your actions were perceived. Your mother may have experienced your intervention as confirmation of her worst fears about herself, that she's no longer capable of managing her own life. This perspective helped me understand why my mother's anger had been so intense and so lasting. It wasn't just about the deception. It was about what the deception represented to her, a fundamental lack of respect for her capabilities and autonomy. In July, I made a decision that felt both necessary and terrifying. I instructed my lawyer to prepare documents that would transfer the mortgage back to a traditional lender, removing me from the equation entirely. It would cost me a significant amount of money. I'd essentially be eating the favorable terms I'd provided and the administrative costs of the transfer, but it seemed like the only way to give my mother back her autonomy and perhaps open the door to some kind of reconciliation. Before I could complete the transfer, however, I received a call that changed everything. It was a Thursday evening, and I was working late in my office when my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, a man's voice asked if I was Sarah Mitchell, daughter of Patricia Mitchell. Yes, I said, my heart immediately racing. Is everything okay? Is my mother all right? Ms. Mitchell, this is Dr. James Harrison from Rush University Medical Center. Your mother was brought to the emergency room this afternoon after collapsing at her home. She's stable now, but we need to speak with her family about her condition. The world seemed to tilt around me. What happened? Is she going to be okay? She's had what appears to be a minor heart attack, possibly brought on by stress. She's conscious and responsive, but she's asking not to see certain family members. However, we really need to discuss her treatment options with someone who can help make decisions if necessary. I was already grabbing my keys and heading for the elevator. I'm on my way. Is my brother there? Mr. Mitchell is here? Yes. Ms. Mitchell, I should tell you, your mother has been quite agitated about seeing you. She's specifically asked that you not be contacted, but given the seriousness of her condition and the fact that you're listed as one of her emergency contacts, we felt it was important to call. The drive to the hospital was a nightmare of traffic and racing thoughts. My mother was in the hospital, possibly dying, and she didn't want to see me. The guilt was overwhelming. What if the stress of our conflict had contributed to her heart attack? When I arrived at Rush University Medical Center, I found Michael in the cardiac waiting room, looking haggard and scared. He looked up as I approached, and for a moment, I saw relief in his eyes before it was replaced by the complicated mix of emotions that had characterized our interactions since the mortgage revelation. How is she? I asked, sitting down beside him. Stable, but not good. They say it was definitely a heart attack, but relatively minor. She's going to need some lifestyle changes, maybe medication, definitely less stress. He gave me a pointed look. The doctor asked about what might have triggered it, and I had to tell him about our family situation. I felt like I was going to be sick. Did you tell him it was my fault? I told him we've been having some family conflicts that have been stressful for everyone. Sarah, we need to figure this out. She's asking for me to handle all her medical decisions, but she's also talking about changing her will, about making sure you can't make any decisions about her care or her finances. She's really angry, and that anger is literally killing her. A nurse approached us before I could respond. Are you Sarah Mitchell? She asked. When I nodded, she continued, Your mother is asking to see you. Michael and I exchanged surprised looks. She wants to see me? I asked, hardly daring to believe it. She's been asking for both of her children. She seems quite agitated about it. Actually, the doctor thinks it might help her stress levels if she can resolve whatever is troubling her. I followed the nurse through the maze of hospital corridors, my heart pounding with each step. I didn't know what I was going to say to my mother or what she wanted to say to me. Part of me hoped for reconciliation, but part of me feared this was her opportunity to deliver one final, devastating rejection. She looked so small in the hospital bed, connected to monitors and IVs, her gray hair spread across the pillow, and her face pale, without makeup. When she saw me, her expression was unreadable, not angry, but not welcoming either. "Sarah," she said quietly, her voice weak but clear. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry about everything. I never meant for any of this to happen." She was quiet for a long moment, staring at the ceiling. When she finally spoke, her words were not what I expected. "I've been thinking about your father," she said, "about what he would say about all of this, about the house, about the mortgage, about us fighting while I'm lying here in a hospital bed." I waited, not sure if I should respond or let her continue. "He always said you were the strong one. Even when you were little, he'd say, 'Sarah's going to be the one who takes care of us when we're old. She's got the head for it, and the heart for it too.'" I used to get so mad at him for saying that because I thought he was being unfair to Michael. But maybe he saw something I didn't want to see. Tears started flowing down my cheeks, but I stayed silent. "I know you bought my mortgage to help me," she continued. "I know you weren't trying to hurt me or control me, even though that's how it felt. I've had a lot of time to think about it these past few months, and I know you did it because you love me. I do love you, Mom. I've always loved you, even when it seemed like you didn't love me back." She turned to look at me then, and I saw tears in her eyes too. "Oh, Sarah, I've always loved you, but I've also always been afraid of you." "Afraid of me? Why?" "Because you're everything I never had the courage to be. You're smart and successful and independent, and you built a life for yourself that doesn't need anyone else. I was always just a housewife, just someone who depended on your father for everything. When he died, I felt so lost, so helpless. And there you were trying to take care of me, and it reminded me of how inadequate I am." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. All these years, I'd thought she was disappointed in me because I wasn't good enough. But she'd been intimidated by me because she thought she wasn't good enough. "Mom, you're not inadequate. You raised 2 children. You ran a household. You took care of Dad when he was sick. You've been volunteering at the library for 15 years. You've done so much. But I never learned to take care of myself financially. I never learned to be independent. When the mortgage payments got hard, I was too embarrassed to ask for help, too proud to admit I was failing. And then you swooped in and fixed everything, and I felt like such a failure, like such a burden." "You're not a burden. You're my mother. I wanted to help you because I love you, not because I thought you were incompetent. But you didn't trust me enough to include me in the decision. You didn't think I was capable of being part of the solution. I had to admit she was right about that. I hadn't trusted her to handle the situation, and I hadn't included her in finding a solution." "You're right," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't trust you to handle it, and I should have. I was so afraid of losing you, so afraid of you losing the house, that I took away your choice. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry." She reached out and took my hand, her fingers feeling fragile and cold. "I'm sorry too, Sarah. I said terrible things to you. I told you that you were dead to me, and I didn't mean it. I was just so hurt and so angry and so embarrassed." We sat in silence for a while, both of us crying, both of us holding onto each other's hands like lifelines. The monitors beeped steadily around us, and I could hear the sounds of the hospital, nurses talking in the hallway, phones ringing at the nurse's station, the general bustle of a place where life and death decisions were made every day. I've been making some really stupid financial decisions since our fight, she admitted finally. I spent money on that kitchen renovation that I didn't have, just to prove that I could make my own choices about my house. I've been thinking about selling and moving to Florida, even though I don't really want to leave Chicago. I've been so focused on proving that I don't need your help that I've been making choices that aren't good for me. I heard about the kitchen from Michael. Mom, you don't have to prove anything to me. And you definitely don't have to move to Florida if you don't want to. But I can't keep living in that house knowing that you own the mortgage. It doesn't feel like mine anymore. Every time I make a payment, I think about how you're receiving it, how you're taking care of me without me knowing it. It makes me feel like a child. I took a deep breath, knowing that what I was about to say would be difficult, but necessary. I've already started the process of transferring the mortgage back to a traditional bank. You'll have a normal mortgage with normal terms and normal payments. It won't be as favorable as what I arranged, but it will be yours. She looked surprised. You're giving up the mortgage? I'm giving you back your autonomy. I should have done it months ago, as soon as I realized how much my interference was hurting you. But you'll lose money on the transfer. I don't care about the money, Mom. I care about you, and I care about us having a relationship. The money doesn't matter. She squeezed my hand tighter. I don't want you to lose money because of my pride. It's not about your pride. It's about doing what's right. I should have talked to you before I bought the mortgage. I should have respected your right to make your own decisions, even if they were decisions I disagreed with. I took that away from you, and I need to give it back. A doctor came in then to check on her vitals and ask about her pain levels. While he was there, I stepped out into the hallway to give them privacy and to call my office to cancel my appointments for the next day. There was no way I was leaving the hospital until I knew my mother was going to be okay. Michael found me in the hallway, looking relieved, but still worried. "How did it go?" he asked. "Better than I expected. We talked, really talked for the first time in years. Maybe for the first time ever. She's been asking about you constantly since our fight," he admitted. She'd never say it directly, but she was worried about you. She kept asking me if you were eating enough, if you seemed happy, if your business was doing okay. I think she missed you as much as you missed her. Why didn't you tell me that before? Because she made me promise not to. She was still so angry, but I could tell she was hurting too. This whole thing has been hard on everyone. We went back into her room together, and for the first time in months, we felt like a family again. Not a perfect family. We still had a lot to work through, but a family that was willing to try to understand each other, to forgive each other, to move forward together. The doctor came back with test results and a treatment plan. Mom would need to stay in the hospital for a few more days for observation, and then she'd need to make some lifestyle changes. Less stress, better diet, regular exercise, medication to prevent future heart problems. But the prognosis was good, and there was no reason to think she couldn't make a full recovery. "The most important thing is reducing stress in your life," the doctor told her. "Family conflicts, financial worries, major life changes, all of these can be triggers for cardiac events. You'll need to find ways to manage stress more effectively." I looked at my mother and saw my own thoughts reflected in her eyes. Our fight, our estrangement, the ongoing tension between us, it had all contributed to her being in this hospital bed. "We're going to work on that," I said, speaking to both the doctor and my mother. "We're going to figure out how to communicate better, how to respect each other's boundaries, how to be a family without all the drama and conflict." My mother nodded weakly but determinedly. "No more secrets," she said, looking directly at me. "If you're worried about me, you talk to me directly. If I need help, I'll ask for it. And if we disagree about something, we'll discuss it like adults instead of letting it fester until someone explodes." Agreed, I said, and I promise to respect your autonomy, even when I think you're making choices I wouldn't make. Your life is your life, and you have the right to make your own decisions about it. Over the next 3 days, while Mom recovered in the hospital, we began the slow process of rebuilding our relationship. I took time off work to be there with her, and we talked about everything: our childhood memories, our different perspectives on family dynamics, our fears and hopes for the future. We also talked about Dad and how his death had affected both of us in ways we'd never acknowledged. I think I've been trying to replace him, I admitted during one of our conversations. He was always the one who took care of the practical things, who worried about money and mortgages, and making sure everyone was secure. When he died, I felt like I had to step into that role, but I didn't know how to do it without overstepping. And I've been trying to prove that I didn't need him to be replaced. She replied, I wanted to show everyone, including myself, that I could manage on my own. But the truth is I did need help, and I was too proud to ask for it. We also talked about Michael and the role he'd been forced to play as the go-between during our estrangement. He shouldn't have had to choose sides, Mom said. That wasn't fair to him, and it wasn't fair to our family. No more putting Michael in the middle, I agreed. If we have problems with each other, we deal with them directly. On the day she was discharged, I drove her home to Oak Park. The house looked exactly the same from the outside, but I knew everything about it was different now. Soon it would truly be hers again, with a mortgage she'd chosen and terms she'd agreed to. The kitchen renovation was half finished, with contractors' tools scattered around and new cabinets waiting to be installed. Do you want me to help you figure out the contractor situation? I asked carefully, not to take over, but just to make sure you're getting a fair deal and that the work gets finished properly. She considered the offer thoughtfully. I'd appreciate that, actually, but I want to be involved in every decision, and I want to understand all the financial implications before we agree to anything. Of course, we'll go through everything together. It felt strange, but wonderful to be welcome in my childhood home again. I helped her get settled, made sure she had her medications organized, and prepared a simple dinner for us to share. We were both being carefully polite with each other, like diplomats negotiating a delicate peace treaty, but underneath the politeness was a genuine desire to make things work. I've been thinking about what the doctor said about stress management, she said as we ate. I think part of my stress comes from feeling like I don't have any control over my life anymore. Getting older is scary, Sarah. Every day I feel a little less capable, a little more dependent, and it terrifies me. I could hear the vulnerability in her voice, and I realized this was the first time she'd ever shared these fears with me. I can't imagine how frightening that must be, I said, but, you're a lot more capable than you give yourself credit for. Look at how you've handled Dad's death, how you've maintained this house, how you've built a social life and stayed active in the community. Those aren't small things. But I couldn't handle the mortgage payments. Nobody expects you to be perfect at everything. Even I make financial mistakes sometimes, and it's literally my job to help people manage money. Needing help doesn't make you incompetent. It makes you human. We spent the evening looking through old photo albums, something we hadn't done together in years. There were pictures of family vacations, birthday parties, school events, holidays, all the ordinary moments that make up a life. Looking at them, I could see the love that had always existed between us, even when it had been buried under layers of misunderstanding and resentment. I want you to know, she said as I was getting ready to leave, that I'm proud of you. I've always been proud of you, even when I didn't know how to show it. You built something amazing with your business, and you did it all on your own. I may not understand exactly what you do, but I know it's important, and I know you're good at it. Those words, the words I'd been waiting to hear my entire life, brought fresh tears to my eyes. Thank you, Mom. That means everything to me. I'm also proud of how you handled this whole situation. Even when I was being horrible to you, even when I said unforgivable things, you kept trying to make things right. You could have just walked away and let me deal with the consequences of my anger, but you didn't. I couldn't walk away. I said, "You're my mother." Even when we were fighting, even when you said you never wanted to see me again, I still loved you. I still worried about you. I still wanted to find a way back to each other. Over the following weeks, we worked together to sort out her financial situation. The mortgage transfer process was completed, and she now had a traditional mortgage with a local bank. The payments were higher than what she'd been paying through my arrangement, but they were manageable, and more importantly, they were truly hers. The real test of our rebuilt relationship came 6 months later, when Mom called me at work with news that would challenge everything we'd learned about communication and trust. "Sarah, I need to tell you something, and I need you to promise not to overreact," she said, her voice steady but serious. My heart immediately started racing, but I took a deep breath and reminded myself of our new rules of engagement. "Okay, Mom, what's going on?" "I've been having some health issues. They found some irregularities in my mammogram, and they want to do a biopsy. I have an appointment next Tuesday." The word biopsy hit me like a punch to the stomach, but I fought every instinct to take charge and start making plans. "I'll come with you," I said, then caught myself. I'd like to be there to support you if you want me there, but it's your choice." "I would like you there," she said. "I was hoping you'd want to come, but I didn't want to assume or impose." "You're not imposing. This is what family does. We show up for each other." On Tuesday morning, I drove to Oak Park and picked her up for the appointment. She looked nervous but determined, dressed in her best outfit, as if she were going to a job interview rather than a medical procedure. The waiting room at the breast center was full of women of all ages, some looking anxious, others appearing resigned to the routine of medical surveillance. We sat together, quietly, my mother reading a magazine, while I tried to focus on emails on my phone. When they called her name, she looked at me with a mixture of fear and determination. "Will you come back with me?" she asked. "If you want me to." "I do." I held her hand during the consultation with the radiologist, who explained the procedure and what they were looking for. The doctor was kind but clinical, answering all of our questions without offering false reassurance or unnecessary alarm. When it was time for the actual biopsy, I waited in another room, pacing and checking my phone compulsively. The procedure took about an hour, and when Mom came out, she looked tired but relieved to have it over with. "Now we wait," she said. "Results in 3 to 5 days." Those 3 to 5 days felt like 3 to 5 months. I called her every day, not to check up on her or manage her anxiety, but just to talk, to maintain the connection we'd worked so hard to rebuild. She seemed to appreciate the contact without feeling overwhelmed by it. "I keep thinking about your father," she told me during one of our calls, about how he handled his diagnosis, how calm he was even when things looked bad. "I want to be like that, but I'm not sure I have his strength." "You have your own kind of strength," I told her. "You don't have to be like Dad to be strong. You can be scared and still be strong. You can ask for help and still be strong." "When did you get so wise?" she asked, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "Therapy," I said honestly, "and learning from my mistakes with you." The call came on a Thursday afternoon while I was in a client meeting. When I saw Mom's number on my phone, I excused myself and stepped into the hallway. "It's benign," she said without preamble. "The biopsy came back clear. It's just a benign growth that they'll monitor with regular screenings." I felt my knees go weak with relief. "Thank God." "Oh, Mom, that's such good news." "I wanted to call you first," she said, "before I called Michael, before I told anyone else. I wanted you to know that you're the person I turn to now when something important happens." Those words meant more to me than any business success or financial achievement ever could. We had truly found our way back to each other, stronger than before. We also hired a financial planner, not me, but a colleague I trusted to help her organize her overall financial picture. She wanted to understand her retirement accounts, her insurance policies, her estate planning, all the details that Dad had handled during their marriage. It was empowering for her to take control of these aspects of her life, and it was a relief for me to know that she had professional guidance without feeling like I was imposing my help on her. A year later, we were sitting in Mom's newly renovated kitchen, drinking coffee and going through family photos. The morning light streamed through the windows she'd chosen herself, illuminating the granite countertops she'd picked out after careful consideration of both aesthetics and budget. Everything about the space reflected her choices, her control over her own environment. "I found something interesting yesterday," she said, pulling out an old photo from when I was about 10 years old. In it, I was standing next to a science fair project, a working model of a solar house. Mom was beside me, her hand on my shoulder, smiling with genuine pride. "I remember that day," I said. "You helped me carry all the display boards to school." "I was so proud of you," she said. "I just didn't know how to tell you that without making it seem like I was putting pressure on you to always be perfect. I thought if I praised you too much, you'd become conceited. I was wrong about a lot of things." "We both were," I replied. "I thought I had to keep proving myself to earn your love. I never realized you already loved me exactly as I was." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Your father would be so happy to see us like this. He always said we were more alike than different, both stubborn, both proud, both willing to fight for what we believed in. He just wished we'd fight on the same side more often." The mortgage transfer had been completed months ago. Mom now had a traditional loan with manageable payments, and I'd learned to respect her financial independence while still being available for advice when she asked for it. We'd found our balance. I could be the successful financial advisor daughter who cared about her mother's well-being, and she could be the independent woman who made her own choices about her life. "I've been thinking about writing a letter to that therapist of yours," Mom said suddenly. "Dr. Chun. I want to thank her for helping you understand how to love me better. She helped me understand how to love you in a way you could accept." I corrected. "The love was always there." "I know. And I want you to know that I see your success differently now. Before, I thought your achievements were a reflection of how I'd failed as a mother, like you'd succeeded despite me, not because of anything I'd given you. Now I understand that your strength, your determination, your compassion, those came from our family, from the love your father, and I did manage to show you, even when we showed it imperfectly, as we sorted through decades of memories captured in photographs. I realized that our story wasn't really about a mortgage or money or even family drama. It was about two people learning to love each other authentically, without conditions or control, without secrets or shame. It was about understanding that sometimes the people we love most are the ones we hurt most, simply because the stakes feel so high. "Mom," I said as I prepared to leave that afternoon, "I need you to know something. Even when we weren't speaking, even when you said I was dead to you, you were never dead to me. You were always my mother, and I was always your daughter, and nothing, no fight, no misunderstanding, no wounded pride could ever change that." She hugged me then, a real hug that lasted longer than our usual polite embraces. "I love you, Sarah. I'm proud of the woman you've become, and I'm grateful for the daughter you've always been, even when I was too stubborn to see it." The house was truly hers now, but more importantly, our relationship was truly ours, built on honesty, respect, and the kind of love that doesn't need to prove itself through grand gestures or secret sacrifices. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the freedom to make their own choices, even when those choices scare you. As I reflect on this journey, I wonder, have you ever had to learn how to love someone differently than you thought they needed to be loved? Have you ever discovered that your way of helping was actually hurting? If this story touched your heart, please give it a like and subscribe for more stories about family, forgiveness, and finding your way back to the people who matter most.